politics. So if you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat, and I will do my best to give you a great answer. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So you can use this show to answer all your questions about politics and where know that you're not going to get judged or ridiculed or roasted or debated for anything that you say or ask on this live stream. I don't believe in making people feel stupid or ashamed for not knowing things and trying to learn new things. I don't believe in calling everybody who disagrees with you a fascist or a libtard cuck. So you're not going to see any debates or roasting or owning on this show. It is only going to be good faith answers to all good faith questions. I might get a little spicy if people are spicy at me in the chat, but I really do try my best to, make sure that tensions do not get too heated here on the live stream and that we are just discussing politics and answering questions in good faith. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a leftist or a liberal or a tanky or MAGA or centrist or whatever. Everybody is welcome here. You can ask me whatever you like. Maybe you're somebody on the right. Maybe you're like a MAGA person who is just genuinely curious why people on the left are the way that they are. And well, you got a real life progressive Democrat here that you can ask all your questions to. So yeah, guys, politics is complicated, especially these days. It's very confusing and weird, and we are in unprecedented territory. And so yeah, I hope that it helps to have a place where you can ask questions, try to figure out what's actually going on. What's up, Mia? Good to see you again. So yeah, you can ask your questions without any kind of fear of judgment or ridicule or roasting or anything like that. This is not one of those shows where I call people up and then we just yell at each other and call each other idiots and try to own each other. I don't care. Like, listen, if you think your question makes you sound like a MAGA person, do not worry about it. I'm not going to judge you for that. If you're worried that your question makes you sound like a libtard cuck, do not worry about it. I'm not going to assume anything. CW says, you taking guests. I almost never do CW, but sometimes I do. Keep your request live. Hang around for a little bit. Maybe there will be time in the show for people to jump on. Brurbrek says, is freedom of speech the same thing as freedom of consequences? No, it is not. But freedom of speech is basically that the government cannot impose, cannot use the power of the state to punish you for your speech. Mia Zelvi Adventure says, just heard something today about Trump wanting Antifa to be a terrorist group. Isn't that kind of weird? I mean, it is weird for a bunch of reasons. Number one, he tried to do this in his first term, but there were enough regular ass Republicans back then that it did not go very far. But now those Republicans have all been purged from the party, and so now they're considering actually doing it. What's also weird about it is that Antifa is not like a group. It is just a philosophy that a bunch of different groups kind of have as part of a soup of other philosophies that they have. It is really just justification for consolidating power of the state and using that power to punish dissent, political enemies, shit like that. It is straight up authoritarian fascist shit. All right, S-Dub says, and they don't realize they should also be anti-fascist. I'm not really sure. Yeah. The man 34 says, does pineapple belong on pizza? If you like it. CG says, does Israel through AIPAC control the Senate and senators? They don't control it, but they do have a lot of influence, the same way that every group, every lobbying group that has a lot of money has a lot of influence. Let's see here. CW says, did you hear about transmaxing? I don't know what that means. Eric Likes Cheese says, do you see this week as a mass microaggression with the divide on Kirk's legacy? I'm not really sure what you mean by a mass microaggression. This really feels like a macroaggression to me, where even before the body was cold, they were saying the left did this, and they were talking about starting a civil war, and Alex Jones was out there saying they're hunting us and we need to fight back and shit like that. So yeah, this is their version of the Reichstag fire, where they're going to use it to justify going after anybody that they don't like. Let's see here. TikTok motherfucker says, Montel Williams says Kirk shooting may not be political, but emotional. Makes sense. I don't know. We still don't really know what the killer's motivations were. Let's see here. South Fork Greg says, "Did you hear? Do you think RFK Jr. would be better for HHS if he wasn't working for Trump?" 100% no. RFK Jr. is a liar. He is a con man. He's completely full of shit. He does not believe in science. He believes in whatever fucking conspiracy theories was last put in front of him. So no, no, I do not believe that he would be doing better work without Trump. Cannot Forever says the guy that shot him was a graper. It seems that way, but again, we don't know. Pally for Life says Israel or Palestine. Why do you need to choose Israel or Palestine? Why can you not be for the protection of both of those groups of citizens, but against both of those governing parties? Like, I don't like the Netanyahu government. I also don't like Hamas. But I believe that the people living in Israel and the people living in Palestine both deserve to live in peace without fear of oppression and be able to, you know, have the freedom for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness the same way we all do, you know? Curtis Worgan says, "What is a groyper? A groyper is a specific wing of the right that is even more extreme than people like Trump and Charlie Kirk. They were constantly protesting and interrupting Charlie Kirk's, Q&A sessions and debates because they believed that he was too far to the center. Because he would talk to Jewish people, for example, and like the groypers are like a severely online, extremely extreme, kind of like admitting, like calling themselves Schnazis, not like letting other people call them that, you know. So yeah, the fact that the inscriptions on the bullets were so like meme heavy is part of a body of evidence to suggest that this fellow, this fellow was a groyper. All right, to my watchers over on YouTube and Twitch, I'm trying out a new microphone today. Let me know how it sounds. All right, let's see here. South Fork Greg says, "Do you think the person who got Kirk was left or right leaning? So much information, I'm confused." So the two things about this that I think are important to make out are, number one, nobody really knows right now. There is a bunch of misinformation coming out from the government, which is really terrifying, and reason number 1 billion of why we should not be voting for Republicans, because then they do shit like this where we can't trust the things that the FBI or the DOJ is saying. There is a bunch of evidence to suggest that he was a groyper, which is an extremely far right, extremely online version of the right, led by self-described Schnazis like Nick Fuentes. But there's also been some some other reporting to suggest that he had been moving to the left, or that because he was in some sort of relationship with his trans roommate, that maybe he was becoming more left, like as he aged or some shit like that. Like we just don't know. But also, like, does it matter? Does it matter what this person's motivations were? Is this a game of who is at fault for this? Or can we all work together to try to stop things like this from happening in the future? I'm concerned with the fact that the Trump government has deleted from their, official websites the FBI study that concluded that more than half, up to 75% of all political violence comes from the right as opposed to coming from the left. And I think that's important. Let's see here. I think it's important to recognize that, not as a who is to blame kind of a thing, but as a, as a Tyra. Thanks for being my ears on the sky there. All right, scrolling down the bottom. Jacob says this guy's gonna flip when Vance sweeps 2028. Yeah, sure thing, Jacob. Ask a question over to boot you. Connor Lamerson says, "What do you believe is the biggest catalyst for the increase in housing prices?" I think it's pretty well established that it is the fact that we have not been keeping up with the rise in population. We have not been building houses to match population increase for decades. Like, this is a decades-long problem. If you read Abundance, Ezra Klein talks about this, where this is not something that started in the 2010s or the 2020s. This is not Governor Newsom's. This is not Governor Newsom's fault. This has been something that's been going on for a really long time. Yeah, you know, and I mean, there are other things that are kind of like adding to that, like the fact that private equity firms like BlackRock are buying up all the single-family homes so that they can control all the market and shit like that. But yeah, it's 99% of it is just we have not been building enough houses. All right, let's see here. Non-consensual learning says, can we have politics and democracy without having this two-party system? Dividing us is conquering us. So I don't know if the two-party system is to blame for the division in America right now. And in fact, I think that's a little hyperbolic to put so many problems on the two-party system when the culprit is the billionaire class. Like, they are doing this on purpose. The algorithms of social media, which, by the way, remember, all these companies are owned by billionaires, and the manipulation of those of social media by billionaires to get us to fight amongst ourselves is, I think, the main catalyst for why we're so divided right now. You know, we've had the two, you know, ascendant parties in this country for a really long time, and division is worse now than it has been in like the last, I don't know, 50, 60 years, something like that. So yeah, you know, I think it's less a fault of the two-party system and more a fault of getting rid of the fairness doctrine, where things like right-wing radio and Fox News, where people are just going out there and saying that Democrats are evil, they're stupid, they're anti-American, they're communist, they're socialist. Like, that's how all this started, you know, and it was all just billionaires that did it. Alrighty, let's see here. Colby says, what do you think it would take for globalization? I mean, globalization is already kind of happening. I guess there's really no way to stop globalization. You got countries like America, like Trump's America, that are actively trying to, you know, they're actively trying to isolate America from the global market, but they're going to fail. You know, they're going to hurt America, and also they're going to fail because the globalization is going to continue outside of America. You know, at best, they can hope that we become like North Korea or Russia, which is still, you know, is still experiencing increased globalization, but just less so than other countries that are benefiting from globalization. Rachel says, I don't understand why socialism is so bad. Rachel, the reason why people think socialism is bad is because of a 100-year campaign by the billionaire class to paint socialism as bad. There's nothing inherently bad about socialism. There are countries that call themselves socialist that aren't socialist, that are treating their populations really poorly, and so that kind of like helps their narrative. But it really is just rich people propaganda to suggest that things like socialism and communism are bad, as opposed to saying, you know what communism is? It's an employee-owned company like Bob's Red Mill or Publix grocery stores. You know what socialism is? It's public education and the post office and the military, you know, shit like that. So you're not wrong. You know, there's nothing really inherently bad about socialism. It is just a word. It is just a word that people throw around as a cudgel to make it so that people don't vote for Democrats, because Democrats would hurt billionaires, as, you know, they would increase billionaires' taxes and force the billionaires to not pollute our air and our water. You know, how dare they? Alrighty, let's see here. You're welcome, Rachel. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your question. Connor Lamerson says, thoughts on America taking an isolationist approach to global affairs specifically? You know, I think that it is clear. Let's see here. I think it is clear. I'm so sorry. I got distracted by the other comments. I think it is clear that America has had, at many times, a deleterious effect on global politics because we have been too much the world's police and too into regime change. Even the things that we have done in good faith, like try to support the Arab Spring, have, at times just like shot back in our face. I think that we should not be isolationist, but I do think that we need to have a much gentler hand. This is where things like soft power and diplomacy are America's strength, as opposed to military intervention and economic sanctions and things like that. Short version, I don't think that isolationism is the rule, but we need to be less of the Ronald Reagan types of like doing Grenada and Bay of Pigs and shit like that. That's JFK, obviously. And more of what the Obama administration was trying to do, like normalizing relations with Cuba and the Iran nuclear deal and stuff like that. All right, scrolling down the bottom, no screen name says, do you think the response to the left of Charlie Kirk is going to cost the Democrats in the midterms? I don't believe that the left is having a negative take on the death of Charlie Kirk. Like, there are individuals, random people on the internet who are being shitty and inappropriate, but all of the mainstream, top of the totem pole left-wing figures like elected politicians and columnists and reporters and shit like that, like all of them are condemning in the strongest possible language this example of of political violence. But that is not stopping the right from attempting to say that the left it's the left's hateful rhetoric that is causing this, and the left is still doing it. They're doing it to this day. They're doing it right now. Look at them, look at them, look at them. So I don't think that that's going to cost Democrats the midterms. It's possible, but I think the main point, wherever the midterms is concerned, is that let's not just sit on our hands and hope that things shake out for the best. Like, let's actually do the work of trying to win the midterms instead of just trying to read the tea leaves, Power Popaholic says, left is doing nothing. That's the problem. What do you mean by that, Popaholic? Because the left is doing a lot. They're not doing what the right says they are doing, but they are doing a lot. So yeah, what do you think? Matt says Democrats are trash. That's not a question. Ask a question or you're going to get booted. Right. Let's see here. Kimmy says soft power is the only power. Everything else is abuse. Yeah, I agree with that. Alrighty. Tomb says there are different definitions of socialism. There are. That's one of the problems. But the thing is, everybody who describes himself as a socialist or a democratic socialist means it the way that I described it. And so when a person on the right looks at a Mamdani or a Bernie Sanders and says those people are bad because they're socialist, they're going off of their definition of socialism and not Bernie Sanders's or Zohran Mamdani's. I think it's really instructive where the conversation usually goes like this, where a left-leaning person will say, I'm a socialist, and then someone on the right will be like Venezuela, and then the person on the left will say, no, Venezuela isn't socialist. We're talking about like Norway and Sweden and shit like that. And then people on the right go, well, that's not socialism. That's something different. And then the people on the left go, well, all right, well, let's just do what they're doing, whatever you call it. And then the person on the right goes, that's socialism, and socialism is bad. Look at Venezuela, etc., etc. Right. John Selfridge says, how can we bring people together in this media echo chamber? I believe that the way to do that is we have to do the work of talking to people in real life. I think it is clear that the social media world is toxic and not helping. And the only way that we can combat that is by getting out there and talking to people in real life. Because you can talk to the most hardcore MAGA person in real life and find that they are not nearly as insane or shitty as their counterparts are made to seem on the internet. And I believe that that is the work of every single American, and hopefully every single person watching this live stream, that you talk to people in real life and then tell the people that you're talking to talk to their friends and family and neighbors as well. And then they talk to their friends, and then those people talk to their friends, and then those people talk to their friends. And then hopefully we can phone tree our way back into a shared reality. Chihuahua Mama says, just a short time I've been here, I can tell you support the left. It's true, I do support the left. I'm a Democrat, a progressive Democrat. Lemmy Gardenmeister says, what's the evidence Tyler was a groyper? All the things that he inscribed on the bullets were groyper memes. Carl Church says, how can we do that when the left is becoming less and less open to civil discourse? The left is not less and less open to civil discourse. I don't really know what you're talking about, Carl Church. Medic Court says, the right is attempting to use the CK murder as a Reichstag fire. Do you think they will succeed? They will succeed if people like me and you don't do the work of making sure that they don't succeed. Medic. This is the problem with a lot of political discourses. A lot of it is like predictions and trying to read the tea leaves. When what we need to communicate to people is that we are in control of the future of this country, and so the right will fail in trying to demonize the left because somebody whose motivations are still unclear decided to assassinate Charlie Kirk. But we can stop it from being successful. Alan Smith says, what's your definition and why is it different? I mean, my definition for socialism is anything that we all chip in a little bit of money and we use that money to buy things that help the rest of us. So public education, the post office, the military, the fire department, the police department, etc. It's the same as if you have, 4 roommates and you all decide to share cable together. It's cheaper when you all kick in and everybody gets to use it, which is really nice. Let's see here. Weaver B says the left is the enemy. No, we're not. I'm not your enemy, Weaver B. But also, you're not here anymore. Connor Lamerson says, what do you think makes Gen Z believe they have it far harder? I think it's a fact, but curious. I mean, yeah, I just think that all of the things that have been slowly building for the last couple of decades are now at a crisis point where housing and rent have slowly become, so unaffordable that there is no barrier to entry. And medical care is no longer something that you can afford if you have a, full-time job or even like a really good paying job. A single bad healthcare, outcome can completely devastate you financially. The job market fucking sucks. The social media fucking sucks. AI fucking sucks. Climate change fucking sucks. And so they are looking at this like, what the fuck have you guys been doing for the past 50 years that now this is the world that we're inheriting? So yeah, I agree that I think that they're right, that it is harder for them than previous generations. Yeah, it seems pretty clear to me, I actually got one of my most popular video on Instagram is talking about just this, about like how shitty the most recent generation has it. Alrighty, scrolling down to the bottom. The Leprechaun says, answer the question. I didn't see it. Connor Lamerson says, do you think we should be able to remove age limits in Congress, seeing as we are the impacted? I don't think you want to remove age limits, right, Connor? I think you want to have age limits, because right now there are no age limits in Congress. Oh no, you want to make it so that younger people can get into office? Is that what you're saying, Connor? Let me know. Clarify. The Leprechaun says, can the Citizens United legislation be overturned without violating rights? 100%. It can be. We just need to elect more Democrats. The more Democrats we elect, the more, the easier it will be to undo Citizens United. Connor Lamerson says, and put in an age limit for being too old. So I don't know, because I believe that the only hard age limits are for president, where you have to be, I think, at least 35 or something to be president. But every other job in politics, I think you only have to be 18 for, right? So yeah, I don't know how I would feel about people who cannot buy cigarettes or vote yet being able to be elected into powerful positions. So I don't know if I would like to lower the age for public office. I'm open to an argument that we could lower the voting age to 16, but I do think that there are things that you learn as you age that are really important for people in government to have. I do support younger politicians. Like I love my, Jasmine Crockett's and my Maxwell Frost's and stuff like that. But I do think that we should not be, allowing, people who just bought their 10th Labubu to be holding public office, I think. That's me being a little hyperbolic and silly, but you guys get what I'm trying to say. Alrighty. Chihuahua Mama says, and this is like Democrats scare me. I don't know what you mean by that, Chihuahua Mama. What do you mean? Medic Court says, no, it's 25 for Congress and 30 for Senator. I think, but for state and local offices, you only have to be 18, right? I feel like I've heard about 18-year-olds winning local and state office. Dan Blackbird, kids can't afford a 24-karat gold Labubu. Medic Court says depends on the state. Okay, yeah, but I am for having an upper age limit on on politicians. They need to have a vested interest in the future of the country and not just be trying to fuck everything up before they die. Let's see here. Alan is a scary concept. Yeah, Cholo, I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about. All right, scrolling down to the bottom. Matt's Adventure says, you a lib or what? I'm a progressive Democrat. I don't know if you would call me a liberal or what. Alrighty. All right, how you guys reading my audio over on Twitch and YouTube still? I'm hoping that because you guys are not currently saying that you can't hear me, that it's still not an issue. Right, Connor Lamerson says, what do you think about some great reset of offices of power? I understand the appeal. I don't think that it is as productive as just people voting. That's all you really need. You could replace every single person that is in office, over the next 3.5 years if everybody just voted. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not even close to being convinced that some sort of a great reset is the move. Oh, excuse me. Kimmy says, wow, people are rude today. I haven't seen it. GM Crop Victim says, denounce the genocide, the G-side in Gaza. Man, what a weird attitude to have. Just like demanding things of people that you don't know. It's just like, who the fuck do you think you are, man? Now, even though I have consistently, regularly, daily, for like 2 years, ever since, for longer than, the current conflict has been going on, I have been speaking up against the behavior of the government of Israel. You putting it like that makes me not want to. All right. Let's see here. Maverick, war on Gaza. The government of Israel has for a long time been oppressing the Palestinians. They have been annexing their territories, kicking them out of their homes. Their military has been responding to incursions into Israel with outsized force. And that is the reason why the population turns to more aggressive terrorist organizations like Hamas. It's the reason why Hamas won that election that happened a bunch of years ago. So, we in the West have been trying for a really long time to negotiate some sort of peaceful two-state solution with the Palestinians and the Israeli government. And it was, marching forwards until Trump got into office, and he started putting the weight of the U.S. government firmly in the camp of the government of Israel, where they moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and they started doing the Abraham Accords, and they assassinated an Iranian general, and they got us out of the Iranian nuclear deal. Trump's first term in office was just him kicking sand into the face of the Palestinians, and which inflamed tensions further, which I think a substantive argument could be made that is what caused October 7th to happen. So, like the way that the Netanyahu government always does, they had an outsized reaction to October 7th. Now, let's be clear, October 7th was horrific and it was a war crime, but, Netanyahu responded to that by doing fucking war crimes and a G-side back. Like, he is punishing people who were not responsible for October 7th. And because of that, we should not be still sending money and weapons to the Netanyahu government. And I think it's really important to say that Biden was not great on this, but he was way better than Trump is currently on this. The situation has gotten so much worse since Trump came in for his second term of office. It's not even fucking up for debate. And Kamala Harris would have been even better on this than Biden was. She would have been so much better on this than the Trump administration currently is. Right, Connor Lamerson says, how would you get into social media politics while working in corporate? I honestly, I wouldn't. The Trump administration has so clearly been attacking people's livelihoods in order to scare people away from being outspoken about politics, where people are losing their jobs for saying things that the Trump administration does not like. A corporation firing you for what you say is not a violation of your freedom of speech. But the government suing a company, unless they fire you for what you said, is a violation of the First Amendment. Because the government is using their power to punish speech that they don't like. All right, let's see here. All right, scrolling up, scrolling up. Maverick says, "Do you believe our government has been compromised by the state of Israel?" I don't believe they've been compromised, but I do believe that Israel has a lot of influence over America because of groups like AIPAC that are extremely well funded. And there is I think, a justified, what do you call it? I think there is a justified focus on the Netanyahu government because of how horrific what they're doing to the people of Palestine is. But I also kind of feel like our laser focus on AIPAC specifically is kind of like foundationally anti-Semitic. Like there are a lot of really shitty, well-funded groups out there that are influencing our politics, like the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation and shit like that. And so I feel like only saying that Israel is influencing our politicians is like dog whistle anti-Semitism. I feel like it's sort of like soft launching anti-Semitism for a lot of people who might not be leaning in that direction. And I will reiterate that a lot of this focus is justified, again, because the Netanyahu government is doing war crimes and a genocide against the people of Palestine. All right, Buffalo says, can you explain who Fed Chair Jerome Powell is? What he has to do with the interest rate. So Jerome Powell is the head of the Fed, which controls basic lending interest rates in America. Like they have one job basically, which is to make sure that using that only tool that they have of controlling the interest rate, that unemployment does not, that the economy continues to grow, inflation is slow, and unemployment is low. Ooh, wow, that rhymed really well. So yeah, he just he wiggles. He was appointed by, I think, Donald Trump. I can't remember. But yeah, it is supposed to be a completely independent agency, like free of any political influence whatsoever. This is also like a real B- econ student's interpretation of it. Like an expert would be able to give you a much more nuanced understanding of the Fed and what Jerome Powell specifically does. But yeah, long story short, the president should not be the one setting interest rates. It should be an independent person at the Fed. Joey says, do you believe in freeing Palestine? Yes, I do. Gloria Nate Hammer says, Donald Trump did appoint him. Wow, yeah, sweet. I love it. Carmine says, B plus tops. Yes, agreed. All right. Thank you, Tyro, and thank you, JP. I appreciate you. I was trying not to do Mike. I'm currently trying not to do Mike. Connor Lamerson says, if you got to wave a wand and choose one singular policy to get passed, what would it be? Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, how sweeping do I get to make this? Like, do I get to say that billionaires should not exist? Yeah. Do I get to say that the CEO cannot make more than 50 times the lowest paid employee? Something like that. Every company in America needs to be employee owned. I don't know. Yeah, maybe one of them's. So I had this conversation with my wife a little while ago because there is a conversation about if you could fix economic inequality or racism first, which would you fix? And I was kind of like on the fence about this, and she made a very convincing argument that racism is more important because a lot of the economic inequality that we are all suffering under is because of weaponized racism to get people to vote for, shitty politicians. But I don't know what policy you institute to undo racism. But I do know the policy that you institute to undo economic inequality. So yeah, I'm open to ideas. If anybody has any anti-racism policies that they think would be beneficial. Kimmy says, I wish I was allowed to talk about politics at home. Why are you not, Kimmy? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And obviously, protect your privacy as much as you like. Connor Lamerson says, like without drastically changing the structure of the government type of thing. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say it is now it is illegal for a person to have a net value of over $1 billion. And so, do with that whatever you will, that kind of thing. I think if no human being has $1 billion, we cripple the power structure of the billionaire class, and we spread out resources to a lot more people, and we will then make people's lives more comfortable, and people then will have more time to pursue their interests and become more educated and get more involved in politics and stuff like that. B Dub says, "What side of the aisle are you on? I'm a progressive Democrat." Aubrey says, "Policies to combat racism should include education on the implicit association test by Harvard." Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, for me, where a lot of this is concerned is just creating a more cohesive melting pot for America, where I feel like it is harder to be racist when you grew up in a multiracial environment, and it is harder to be a shitty rich person if you're going to school with people who are not rich people. And then when other billionaires tell you that the lower class are all a bunch of parasites sucking out our teats, then they go, well, that's not my friend Jeff. Jeff's cool and he's poor, shit like that. B Dub says, "We'd probably disagree a lot then, but I respect it." All right, well, ask a question, and as long as you're here in good faith, I'm not gonna boot you or anything just because we don't disagree, agree politically. Shork says, "If I knew billionaires paid 90% tax, I'd be fine with them. Why isn't this solution enough?" I mean, I'm sure paid 90% tax. I think it's a little more complicated than that, Short. Like, I get your meaning. Like, if they're paying enough for us to have, the most amazing universal health care and universal basic income, and our public schools are palaces, and American citizens are want for nothing, is it okay for there to be billionaires? And I guess, sure, the danger is still there, though, that they would use their outsized economic influence to change the government to be less equitable and make it so that we are not living with abundance, but instead with scarcity. So yeah, I think that's sort of like, the only issue there remaining would be that the billionaires would then have the power to revert back to the system that we currently are in. Let's see here. Quito Ecuadorian says, "Jared, interesting how MAGA plays victim, yet I've caught MAGA trusting my professor online." Yeah, the philosophy of MAGA, and again, I don't blame the voters for this. I blame the thought leaders and the politicians like Trump and Musk and Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones and shit like that. It is based in hypocrisy. Like, they do it on purpose. They do it to enrage us, and then we waste so much fucking time, energy, and breath showing them how they're being, hypocrites and lying, and that delights them. Like, that's why I encourage people not to engage in that way, but instead to avoid debates and fights, but instead just to engage, and particularly to engage in real life as opposed to online. Ian Anderson says, how do you feel about Charlie Kirk's death? Obviously it was terrible. It was a massive fucking tragedy. It is escalatory in regards to political violence. There should not be violence. There should be not political violence. Political violence is particularly more escalatory than other kinds, which is really, really terrifying. So yeah, I don't think it should have happened. Nobody deserves that. I don't think that we need to lionize somebody who was clearly an extremely toxic person who said a bunch of very damaging and shitty things. I think we can be honest about what a deleterious, person he was in our culture, while also saying that he should not have been assassinated. All right, Jack says, "Thoughts on the death penalty?" I'm against the death penalty. First of all, we do not have a perfect justice system, so that means that the state and federal government of America has 100% put people to death who are innocent. That should be enough to completely get rid of the death penalty. In addition to the fact that there's no value to the death penalty. Like, it does not de-incentivize people to do crimes. We have the data on that, So the only real argument for the death penalty is that it makes the victims' families feel better, and I'm like, I don't think it's healthy to have like a vengeance-based justice system. Connor Lamerson says, "What do you disagree with your party on the most?" I mean, the Democratic Party is a big tent. It is a rainbow coalition, and so there are people within the Democratic Party who have all sorts of beliefs that I disagree with, both the far left and the more center left. I believe that the leadership is probably where I disagree the most. I do not feel like they're meeting the moment. I do not feel like they are being equitable to the younger, more progressive candidates and to the ideas that are coming out of that wing. But they also have a lot of positive qualities that we don't yet see in the young progressive wing. Like the kind of experience and relationships that you get. Hey, I'm a cowboy. All right. Connor Lamerson says, I guess I mean the establishment, like the front-facing party. Yeah, I don't think they're meeting the moment. I don't think that they are actively supporting and encouraging the younger, more progressive wing of their party. Jack says, do you believe in God? I don't believe in like a Christian God. My philosophy regarding that is from Hamlet. It is, there are more things between heaven and earth ratio that are trumped up in our philosophy. I don't believe that any religion has it correct, but I also believe that it's possible that there's really weird shit out there that we do not understand. We don't have the capacity to understand. We're like dogs trying to understand the internet. Let's see here. The Virginia Steptist says conservation is all you all have to. I don't know what that means. S-Dub says the lack of support for young progressives is driven by AIPAC and views on Israel. Not necessarily, S-Dub. I mean, AIPAC was not making Pelosi call the Green New Deal the Green Promise or whatever, It did not make Pelosi say that she thought it was okay for politicians to do insider trading or to, actively put her foot on AOC's head to try to keep her from climbing the ranks. Let's see here. Jack says, thoughts on Israel. How would you handle it if you had the power? I mean, first things first, we need to approach the nations surrounding Israel, like Iran and Iraq and Palestine, with diplomacy in mind. And we need to stop doing the kind of sanctions that don't hurt the governing bodies, but only hurt the populations. I think that we need to immediately change our relationship with Israel specifically, because they are abusing our support to do barbaric and horrific things to the neighboring countries. They are acting like the superpower as opposed to the friend of the superpower. They're the short guy getting into fights with people at the bar because they know that they have a fucking Taekwondo expert best friend that's standing right next to them. So yeah, stop sending them money and weapons. Start using soft power to influence them to stop doing war crimes and G-side. Form a coalition with the countries in Europe, for example, that are already speaking out against what Netanyahu is doing. Rob Kosis says, what is one thing that Trump has done that you agree with? So Rob, I'm going to answer this question, but I just want to get on the record here that type of question always rings a little, to me, it gives me the ick, because I don't know why I need to find a nice thing to say about the dude who is stabbing me in the throat. Like, do I really need to say that the guy who is currently murdering me has nice eyes or some shit like that? The scale of damage, the scale of illegality, the scale of barbarism and unconstitutionalism that is coming out of the Trump administration, both in the first term and now, and how much worse it is now, it just seems so hollow and bipartisan for the sake of bipartisanship, to try to find a silver lining in this mountain of shit of the Trump administration. So yeah, will I give him his flowers for not producing the penny anymore because that was a massive waste of government resources? Sure. But god damn, does that not even be close to fucking equaling the damage that him and his fucking people have done. Alrighty, let's see here. Jack says, as a Democrat, were you upset with how Kamala Harris was shoehorned into the ballot? 100% not, Jack. The main issue there was that Biden decided to run for a second term. Nobody in the Democratic Party was willing to stand up to him in order to, except for Dean Phillips, and so when he dropped out, there were 110 days left until the election happens. And while a convention primary would have been one way of making it a little bit more equitable, I suppose, there were at least two states, I remember one was Ohio and there was another one, that were threatening to leave the name of the Democratic candidate off of their ballot unless they were told before the DNC, before the Democratic National Convention, who the candidate was. So Ohio, being a very powerful swing state, was basically saying, tell us who your nominee is going to be before the convention. So states run by Republicans forced the Democrats' hands. I didn't upset me at all. I thought it was the right move in the situation. It was making the best of a bad situation. All right, scrolling on the bottom, Cole Blue says you haven't been here in a min. Yo haven't been here in a min. But how do you feel about Charlie? I don't think that anybody deserves what happened to Charlie Kirk. I condemn in the strongest possible language all political violence, whether it is perpetrated against the left or against the right, by the left, by the right. It is all wrong. Violence, property destruction, extrajudicial murders, it's all wrong. But I also don't think that because he was assassinated, we need to, whitewash his history, where if you just repeat the things that he said to people, you get accused of smearing him. It's like, I am literally just telling you what he said, guys. So yeah, he was a toxic person. He was detrimental to our politics and our culture. And at the same time, he 100% did not deserve to be assassinated. Fucking HTX Legend says, I find myself saying what happened to Charlie is a fact of his beliefs. Am I wrong? I think that is a 100% fair thing to say. The world in which this happened is a world that he was openly advocating for, and a world that he was partially responsible for. I'm not saying that he caused this to happen. That's real victim blamey kind of an attitude. But I don't think that it is inappropriate to point out that he said things like having the Second Amendment is worth the sacrifice of gun deaths, of which he is now one. I do think that we probably needed about a week before people pointed that out, just out of respect for his children and the people who might have been hurt by what happened. It felt a little dickish to me that we were doing that on day one. I say we, the collective we, not the we of the left. I was saying the world was doing this. But yeah, I think it's a totally fair thing to say. Connor Lamerson says, thoughts on Kamala declining alternative media interviews leading to the election. It may have been a mistake. It may not have been a mistake. We will never know. What we do know is that she was put into an impossible situation to win an election with, 100 days, less than a year, less than half a year, where people mostly take like 2 years to plan a presidential run. So if it was a mistake, I do not believe it was her or her campaign's fault, because they were put in an impossible situation. All right, fucking HGX Legend says, I can't say, I just can't feel sad for a podcaster when I've been deployed and gone to combat. Can you feel bad for his children who are now without a dad? I don't know. I think that his wife was probably kind of a shitty person also, but I still don't think that you deserve to have your husband ripped out of your life in that way. So yeah, do you have any sympathy for them, for those people? Jack, thoughts on people getting fired for online comments about Charlie's death? I mean, it is up to any corporation to decide if your speech has or is currently ruining their reputation and is costing them business. I think that there's probably like a sliding scale where that is more or less appropriate, where if you got fired just for pointing out that Charlie Kirk said X, Y, or Z, that feels a little bit less fair to me than somebody who's going out there and being like, he fucking deserved it, whatever. Yeah, but I think the bigger issue is the way that the Trump administration is incentivizing companies and universities to fire people for saying negative things about Charlie Kirk, where that is a blatant violation of the First Amendment, to use the power of the government to punish people's free speech. If that company didn't want to fire you, but they were forced to by the Trump administration, then that is without question wrong. I don't give a shit what you said. That is protected speech. Alrighty, let's see here. Fucking HGX Legend says, unfortunately, the military taught me that it happens. I've become calloused to family pain. Oh, that makes me feel really sad for you, my guy. I hope that you're able to reclaim some of that, because I think that's a really important part of being a human, is having the kind of radical empathy for even people that you find to be, damaging, or just like generally shitty people. Yeah, good luck, buddy. I say that with all sincerity. All right, Jess V says, I think it depends on where patients in a hospital need to feel like it's a neutral place. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I've definitely felt less comfortable in who my doctors are based on their political beliefs. Yeah, yeah, I'm not really sure about that. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I'm not gonna die on either side on that mountain. HTX Lesson says I'm in therapy and working through it. Good for you, man. Good for you. And I wish you all the best of luck in your journey, my man. Mia Madison says, "What do you think about the great noticing about who runs the U.S.? Is that referring to AIPAC or Israel running the U.S., Mia Madison, or is that more like the rich people run America, Mia Madison? Because there's a lot of gray area in that sentence that I really want to make sure that we are talking about the same thing. Let's see here. Jack Texas is referring to Israel. Yeah, I mean, again, it's like soft-coded anti-Semitism. I think that you can make accurate points about the toxic influence of organizations like AIPAC, and you can point out that the Netanyahu government is doing atrocities without suggesting that Jews have infiltrated the American government and are pulling the strings. I think it's really important that we be specific about this because it's in the vagaries that people are able to get radicalized and pushed into straight Nick Fuentes style anti-Semitism as opposed to soft, casual anti-Semitism. Kyle Ashley says, do you support a one planet nation? I don't know what that means. Kyle Ashley did that one. Jack says, do you think the voting age should be lowered, raised, or remain the same, and why? I'm not going to die on this mountain. I think it's pretty good at 18. If anything, I'd be open to an argument to lowering it. I am not open at all to an argument on raising it. I think we need to find a place where the people who are voting are, it's their future that they're voting for. So does that mean that a 16-year-old has the right to decide which politicians are going to be deciding, what the world looks like in 20 years? I think so. I think an argument could be made there. Yeah, I see no argument for 18-year-olds being too irresponsible or immature to vote. Eli says, what should a Democratic voter do right now if they want to get involved? Eli, excellent question. So short version is go to my Discord because I have a thread posted that is just that. If you go to my bio, there's a link in my bio that will take you to my Discord. And it's what I call the work. It's a thread called the work. Short version, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can join organizations that are already doing this work. Organizations like Indivisible, Run for Something, and Vote Save America. Those are three of my favorites. Long version, you need to talk to people in real life. You need to put a lot of political pressure on your elected representatives. You need to be a part of boycotts and strikes and protests. But yeah, we have to phone tree our way back into having a shared reality with our fellow Americans, and every single one of us is responsible for that. Every single one of us is responsible for unelecting every single Republican that is letting this shit happen. Jack, thoughts on trans kids in other gender sports? I know I worded that poorly, but you know what I mean. Oh yeah, Jack. I am bothered to my core the way that the right has weaponized this issue, where the president is out there saying the Democrats believe in men playing in women's sports and trans for everybody, which is it's just so fucking stupid. He's so stupid. It is an issue for some people. I think it is really important to point out that the epidemic of men transitioning into women so that they can dominate women's sports is not happening. What is happening is that trans women, men who feel like they were born in the wrong body and decide to transition, they want to play sports. And they should be able to play sports. Where they play sports, this is such a tiny fucking issue that affects so few people. Let's leave it up to the states. Let's leave it up to those specific schools to decide what is appropriate for those specific individuals. Additionally, there are no men who have transitioned into women who have all-time world records in any sport. It is every single record, I believe, at the last time I checked, is still held by a naturally born woman. And so even the argument that men that transition to women have an unfair advantage, I find to be unfounded. Austin Archer also pointed this out, that is the point of sports that it has to be 100% fair? Like, isn't it unfair that Shaq exists and he's half Goliath? Shit like that. Right. Disc Golf says, ridiculous take, LOL. All right, well, that's not a question, Disc Golf. Congratulations, you're out of here. Alrighty, everybody. Where are we at here? Dayglow Ginger says, there's no one dominating. This is a non-issue. That is accurate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 says, you are so ignorant. That is also not a question. Tag says, orange juice or apple juice? I like both of them. You know what I like to do? I like to have a big glass of sparkling water and just put a tiny bit of juice in it, regardless if it's apple or pomegranate or orange or whatever. Right. Real Life Wisdom says, total BS. What do you think I said that was inaccurate, Real Life Wisdom? Ray Von Laugh says, bro doesn't think the Y chromosome matters. I mean, it matters when I fucked your mom. All right, scrolling down to the bottom here. Eli says, bet I will check out your Discord tonight. Thanks, man. Thank you, Eli. I look forward to seeing you in there. Connor Lamer says, not Trump specifically, but what do you think is your most right-leaning take? Ooh, that's a good question. Do I have a right-leaning take? Honestly, don't know. I think my most right-leaning take is like being anti-tanky and anti-accelerationist, where I see some people on the left believing that the Democratic Party is just as bad as the Republican Party, and I'm like, that is actively not true. I think, yeah, my most right-leaning take is that the Democratic Party is better than people give it credit for. You know, but I don't know if there's anything in the Republican specific platform that I would agree with whatsoever. Like, it's all just tax cuts for the rich and demonizing immigrants, you know? All right, everybody, we are at an hour. So I'm going to start wrapping things up. Jack says, do you find yourself able to remain friends with right-leaning people? How far right can they be? I think that's a decision that everybody needs to make for themselves. I don't know who in my life is, you know, so far to the right that I find their politics objectionable and barbaric. There are some very old people in my life, like friends of my parents and shit like that, who are part of the MAGA world, and, you know, I just don't talk to them because I'm just like, I don't know. I just find that to be kind of gross. But also, like, you're old, you know, like, it's really easy for old people's brains to get pickled by Fox News and shit like that. Yeah, that's a tough one. And honestly, I don't know if I have the strength to get into that at an hour in, but I appreciate you being here, Jack. Thanks so much for all your questions. Even though I may not 100% agree with every take you've said, I love how you articulate yourself. Thank you, Jack. I like you being here. Dane says, both parties have their own issues. If you can't see that, you're part of the problem. Yeah, but the issues of the Democratic Party are so much smaller than the issues of the Republican Party, Dane. That's my entire fucking point, is that I would much rather, if I own a 7-Eleven, I would much rather have kids reading magazines than a dude stabbing me in the throat and stealing all of my money. And that is the scale of difference between the wrongs of the Republican Party and the wrongs of the Democratic Party. We do not judge the Republican Party harshly enough, and we judge the Democratic Party too harshly, where we feel like the tiny mistakes the Democratic Party makes are equal to the straight up fucking fascism, concentration camps, shutting down rural hospitals, letting infectious diseases in other countries run rampant, and then getting rid of the teams that make sure that those diseases don't come into America. Like, it's fucking insane, man. Donald Trump has a fucking cryptocurrency. He is a national security threat because adversarial nations are bribing him with dark money through his cryptocurrency. And you cannot tell me that there's a single fucking thing on the Democratic side that is even close to equaling that kind of malevolence. Alrighty, everybody. Badger75 says, my wife won't let me get Venmo, so I can't send a meme. I mean, there's other ways that you can support the show if you want, guys. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I have a Patreon that you can join for $1, for as little as $1 a month. You can buy things from my store. You can send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube. And I think there's a thing called Super Fans now on TikTok that I think is like a subscription thing that you guys can do. But again, you don't have to. I just appreciate you guys being here and asking questions and stuff like that. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. If there are any questions or anything comes up, when the live stream is not happening, do not be shy about reaching out, because I have a goal. I have a project to unelect every single Republican, to make them feel the electoral consequences for the shit that they are fucking doing right now that is unconscionable and without justification. So yeah, let's teach the Republican Party that there are electoral consequences for hurting the vast numbers of people that they are hurting. And I want to be a resource for you guys to be part of that project. So join the Discord, shoot me a DM, email me through my website, any way that you want to get in touch, get in touch. And yeah, lastly, just my heartfelt plea that y'all do the work, because it is only through us doing the work that we're going to be able to get out of this, Connor Lamerson says, why do you think the right gained so many votes this last election? As a combination of things, misinformation, propaganda, and incumbency bias, where people were just upset about whoever was in charge because of inflation, and they were not putting the pieces together of who is responsible for the inflation. Let's see here. Dane says the left has lost the middle. That is inaccurate, Dane. In fact, many people believe, I think inaccurately, but many people believe that the reason why the left lost in 2024 was because they appealed too much to the middle. Ackerley says, what is your opinion about the indoctrination of the U.S. by Israel? Should we be worried? I don't know what you mean by indoctrination of the U.S. by Israel. Honestly, Ackerley, that feels a little anti-Semitism coded, so let's try to be more specific. Ace says, what can we do to fix this country? Ace, you know what I'm going to say. Do the work. Go to my Discord. Go to the thread called The Work, and just do as much of that as you can and as you want. MD Rob says, Christian nationalism is taking over our country. Do you agree? I agree that Christian nationalism is on the rise. I agree that they are trying to take over this country. Whether they're successful or not is completely up to people like me and you, because we have the power to stop them. We have the power of saving the separation between church and state. It's up to us, guys. No one's coming to save us. Short says, was Biden a good president? So right now I'm reading Jake Tapper's book about how Biden was way too old to be president, and a bunch of people in his administration knew about it, but through a combination of frog boiling in water syndrome and wanting to maintain proximity to power, they decided to gaslight the Democratic establishment, other Democratic politicians, the news media, the Democratic base, into thinking that he was running circles around them in cabinet meetings and shit like that. If you're just judging Biden by... So in that sense, he was a bad president. If you're just judging by the things that were accomplished during the Biden administration, regardless if it was him or Lena Khan or, insert name of, progressive cabinet member that did it, I think you have to acknowledge that it was an extremely successful presidency. So whether he was responsible for that or just responsible for staffing the various agencies that were responsible for that, he was a good president. All right, everybody. Excellent. Bernstein equals blue star, white flag. That's an example of anti-Semitism. Thank you for being here, everybody. I'm going to get out of here. Do the work. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.